Okay, we're good to go.
Thank you. Thanks, Brooke. Welcome, everybody, to the latest webinar in our series from our newly diagnosed team. My name is Linny. I work at Parkinson's UK and I'm the newly diagnosed development manager. Before I get stuck into the webinar, just a couple of things I want to say. So we have a live Q&A while you are here, but I am also saying welcome to people who may be watching this at our research conference called Parkon, which is taking place in October. So if you are watching from Parkon, the live Q&A won't be accessible. Sorry about that, but we certainly hope that you'll still learn something and get something out of the webinar. So for those of you who are here this evening, our Q&A will be open. Just before I introduce our lovely panel to you, I want to say that we cannot give any individual medical advice to anybody. That would have to be decided between you and your healthcare team. It would be wrong of us to do otherwise. Similarly, the theme of our webinar this evening is tech, but we're not endorsing and we're not recommending that you try any particular tech or device. But what we will do is reflect the experience of the panel, and we certainly hope that by the end you'll have a much more informed way of perhaps looking around and choosing what's right for you and just generally exploring. So I'll get everybody to introduce themselves. If I can come to you first, John, if you can tell us your name and your connection to Parkinson's, that would be great.
Sure. Thanks, Lenny. My name's John Pettigrew. I work at Parkinson's UK. I do not have Parkinson's. My job and the reason I'm here is I look after a thing called the Tech Guide, which Parkinson's UK has been working on for the last year or two to provide information and confidence to people in the community about tech that is specifically aimed at people with Parkinson's.
Brilliant. Thanks, John. And Sandra, can I come to you?
Hi, I'm Sandra. I've got young onset Parkinson's. I was diagnosed about 2 years ago when I was 49. I think I'd had symptoms since I was maybe 40 or so. Since then, I've been involved with the Tech Guide for about a year as a member of the steering group. And I think I've done a couple of other things to do with Parkinson's UK here at about the place.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sandra. And Paul, can I come to you?
Hi, I'm Paul. I was diagnosed with young onset Parkinson's in 2014, so quite a long time ago now. Over the last couple of years, I've been involved with the Tech Guide as well. I'm on the steering group, and I'm also a member of the reviewer pool. And I do have a couple of other volunteer roles with Parkinson's UK as well that have got involved with tech a little bit.
Brilliant. Thanks, Paul. And last but definitely not least, Will.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. My name's Will Young. I work at the University of Exeter. I'm a psychologist, and most of my research relates to Parkinson's. And I am on the scientific panel for the Tech Guide, so I have the pleasure of working with John in that capacity as well.
Fabulous, thank you. Okay, so we will get stuck straight in then. So we've had some questions pre-submitted to us, but do feel free to pop questions in the Q&A as well. So we'll make a start with where do we find the latest evidence about technology and devices? And is it okay if I come to you first, John?
Sure. It's probably a surprise to nobody. It's a surprisingly difficult question to answer. I'll start with the Tech Guide because obviously that's the thing that I'm most closely involved in. One of the main reasons that as a charity we built it is to provide one place you can go to learn about all these technologies that are aimed at people with Parkinson's. And the keys for us is we try not to just collect and catalogue everything, but we also give a place for people with Parkinson's themselves to share their experiences. We collate and manage a whole reviewing process that we're going through with that. So you get a sense of hopefully what other people really think of these things. That said, our scope is relatively small. It's a whole lot of other things, other ways you might need to engage with technology. So there are a few good places to go to, I would suggest. One is the Parkinson's UK forum, which is a chat forum, which is on our website, which thousands of people on the community from the community talk to each other about all sorts of issues, and technology is very much one of those. Another thing I would recommend, if you're finding difficulties using technology for any reason, AbilityNet are a fantastic charity who provide advice and support for people who need to engage with technology, particularly if they have any physical disability or issue that's affecting that. So yeah, they're all very good people to talk to.
Brilliant, yeah. And just sort of on that theme of where to go for that kind of support and how to access it, Sandra, just you were reflecting before when we were having a conversation about work and getting some stuff through. Was it access to work? Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so Access to Work is a government scheme designed to support disabled people to stay in work. So I applied for that back last October, and I find it's quite a long delay at the moment. It's a big queue. But so I finally, I think it was June, I finally got approval for TalkType, which is really helpful. So I use it speech to text software, but it's really good speech to text software. So now a lot of the work I do, I just speak it in. And it's just so much more effective than the speech text. When I use the speech text on my phone, quite often it's quite inaccurate in the output. I don't know whether that's because I'm not speaking clearly enough or anything like that. But I found Access to Work has been useful, but it is, I have to say, it is a bit of a battle. It's become, I think it used to be a bit of a bit of a hidden sort of secret thing. It's become much more well known. And now there's a lot more demand, which means you have to wait a long time. But I will give you a top tip, which is if you're starting a job, if you apply before you start the job, they have to do you within 4 weeks. Whereas I applied after I'd started the job, so I waited 8 months. So it's worth being aware of that little point.
Perfect. Yeah. And I will just give a shameless plug for our advisor service as well. So if you are going through anything like that, we are here to support. Do contact our helpline and we'll see if we can support you with that. So Paul, I wanted to ask you too. So we're just kind of reflecting about where you might go to find out about devices and tech. What's your experience been?
Yeah, thank you, Lily. I've used the same route as John, I suppose, that the Tech Guide is a good resource that's developing quickly. I've also used the Parkinson's UK forum and the Facebook community groups as well. That's very useful, the way that people chat about all sorts of things like devices. And I guess I've also got some good recommendations from an occupational therapist in the past for apps and things that can help, like apps that help with sleep and just cognitive things as well. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a good reflection. So just thinking about occupational therapists or other health professionals that you might be in contact with, who might be able to support you to access the things that are right for you. So Will, just thinking about that, you know, do you feel that you're kind of like more at the do you feel you're at the cutting edge? What's the deal with the sort of research and into all the tech and things?
There's a question. Yeah. Yeah, I think I mean not just in my research group, but I think in general there is a sense that we're learning more and more every year. It seems as though there is a broad sense that we're understanding more and more about why certain things might help. In terms of technologies, in the past, it's been more the case that a certain technology has been used, but there hasn't, and some people would say that it might be helpful and it might be less helpful for other people, but there hasn't really been much of a detailed understanding about why. And I think that that's now changing, and we're beginning to understand with the range of different technologies. Just taking devices that are designed for cueing movements, and for designed for helping with say walking or with typing or moving your upper limbs in different ways. I think we are now learning much more about why certain approaches are going to be more effective than others, and I think the conversations that I overhear a lot and are part of a lot, much more now talk about future years, hopefully getting to the point where it might be possible to recommend certain approaches based on certain characteristics that people might be able to report about themselves. Because there's so many different options available, it would be helpful if we could measure certain. If people could report certain experiences they have, and details about their own characteristics, and then there'd be some forum or way for people to get advice about maybe a certain selection of technologies that have a greater chance of being helpful for them. So
Yeah.
I think things are changing quite quickly.
Yeah, I can imagine that. And I suppose that would be the dream, would be to have tailored advice for every individual. We know from the Parkinson's community that no two journeys are exactly the same, and people are unique, and their symptoms are unique, and their response to treatments can be really unique too. Yeah, so definitely that would be the dream. And would you say, sort of in terms of research, how important is it to have a good variety of different people, kind of age, gender, ethnicity, and things like that in terms of taking part in research?
Oh, in terms of the people participating in the research, it's hugely important, and I think people have known that it's important, but we are only really beginning to appreciate how important it is more recently. And the Parkinson's UK have been very good in looking to promote broader engagement in research. And so yeah, hopefully that side of the research is improving. But as researchers, I think we can do much more to find ways of overcoming barriers. And in the past, maybe we haven't really been very good at even identifying what those barriers are to research. But with the help of Parkinson's UK, there is an enormous appetite in the research community, I believe, to identify them and find ways of making the research much more accessible.
Yeah, absolutely. And Paul, I think you've taken part in some research. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, I've got involved in research in various ways. So I'm a public and patient PPI volunteer. I can't remember public and patient involvement. That's it. So yeah, so I've been involved with various projects through that, and some of them have been for apps. So it's been a lot of commenting on prototypes and designs and saying what will work for people with Parkinson's and what might not, and where things need to be refined. And I've also done lay grant reviewing, which helps decide which projects should be funded by Parkinson's UK. And there's quite a number of life projects that they're funding that actually involve tech at the moment. So that's quite good. So you feed in at an early stage and you make sure they've got plans to disseminate the information, and the plans are realistic, basically, and they can deliver real benefit for people with Parkinson's.
Yeah, and so I think it's really good to know that the Parkinson's community is at the centre of that. So when John talked about the tech guide and how it's been developed, it has been developed with and by the Parkinson's community. So we are genuinely trying to look at things that are actually useful for the community, and that's been reviewed by the community, so we can perhaps have a little bit more confidence in those opinions, maybe. Yeah. And Sandra, have you been involved in research too?
Yes, I have actually. Yeah, there's been a couple of things. So locally, there was a Parkinson's family project where they went through and basically just interviewed me about all kinds of things about family history, going back different ways, and whether I'd been exposed to, I think it was pesticides and things, lots and lots of different things, what relatives several generations back passed away from, all kinds of things. But then they also had my parents in and they interviewed them as well. So that was quite an interesting thing for all concerned, because they're trying to get obviously the context around the person with Parkinson's rather than just looking at the person with Parkinson's. So yeah, that was quite interesting. I've also had my DNA sequence as part of the UCL study, where they're looking to see who had different, I've forgotten what it's called, but different gene types. So mine came up as idiopathic. And then depending on your sequencing of the DNA, they select different people for different research studies based on that. So I haven't been called yet for anything, but my details are there and ready to go. There's one other thing something I found a little bit frustrating is there's been quite a lot of things where researchers come up and they've wanted people who've not started on medication. So I think one of the barriers to research sometimes is, and I know it is the nature of research, but the criteria can be very tight. So you think, oh, I'll get involved with that. Oh, I can't. Or I'll get involved with that. Oh, I can't. But that's science, isn't it? So it's just how it is. But I think the more any of us can do to get involved, obviously it's going to help us move forward.
Yeah, and we have a Take Part hub on our website, Parkinson's UK website. So if you are interested in getting involved in research, I think some of Will's projects will be up there. You can pop in your postcode and it'll tell you all the opportunities that are available. And these are opportunities to research that we have spent time, as Paul described, as a lay grant reviewer, looking at the projects, evaluating them, and investing in projects that we think are worthwhile. And some of them are just a phone call, aren't they? And some of them you might be interviewed or go and visit some. Yeah, there's all sorts of different ways you can get involved. And of course, tech is massively important in analysing all those results and things like that. And I think maybe enables researchers to involve more people as well, perhaps. But I was going to ask you, Paul, how have you found? Has it been very hands-on doing the sort of tech stuff? What's been your involvement?
So it's really varied. The things I described so far are kind of hands-off and reviewing things, but I've also done some more active reviews. I did a review for the tech guide of a fitness app. So I tested that for, I think, 10 weeks, doing the fitness program. So that was quite intense, but it was really good to be involved with that and give feedback on how that'd been for me.
And how did you find it?
It was quite good, actually. The only thing I found was it was quite repetitive in what I would ask you to do. So I think that was my main comment. The exercises were good, but you'd have to do the same thing every day for the week, which I found quite boring. But yeah, they were good exercises. I just would have preferred a bit more variety. And it was quite nice to see that published in a wider review. Because what the tech guide does, it takes, I think, 6 reviews from various people affected by Parkinson's, and it merges them into one big review. So you get a sort of balanced feedback.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. Anything else from you, John, on that sort of research aspect, just before I move on to the next question?
I suppose I would just underline what you said about the Take Part Hub. I actually sit inside the research team for organizational reasons. And you just type your postcode in and it will tell you all the stuff that's going on in your area. And as Sandra said, some of them are super precise in what they're looking for. Others are not. Others are literally, I mean, you don't even have to have Parkinson's to take part in some of these studies, because often they need a control group, or so you can get your family members to sign up or your friends, and it all helps. And then to some of what Paul was saying, we, as an organization, we don't just need people to sign up to take part in the trials, although of course we do, but we also want people to help review the proposals like Paul does. We want to help have people to input into how the study is designed, so that, don't just say things like pop into our lab in the centre of London for half an hour once every week, because that's not reasonable. But they'll do that sometimes, and the people from the community can say, hang on. So it's a huge range of ways to get involved as well if you like that kind of stuff. So Take Part Hubs a good first place, but if you want to do more, you can get involved in other ways as well.
Brilliant, thanks. So I'm going to come on to another question that we had sent in to us, and it's quite specific, and it's asking about the possible benefits from something called Wilhelm ball. I don't know what that is, but I think you know, John?
Yes, the Wilhelm ball is a small white ball. It's a piece of tech that was developed in, he says confidently, Lithuania. Yes, it's a company, and what it does is it vibrates, and it claims to help reduce tremor, which is obviously a concern for many people. And it's a product that's been listed in the tech guide for a while, and we actually published a review on it a few months ago. As Paul said, we gave this device to 6 people. They lived with it for a month, and what people said about it was it's portable. You can carry it around. It's quite easy from that point of view. They found it very easy to use. What you do is you hold it in your hand for 10 minutes while it vibrates, and then you hold it in the other hand for 10 minutes while it vibrates, and you have to do that several times a day. So that's dead easy. Of our 6 reviewers, 3 found it did nothing at all. 2 found that it produced a mild reduction in symptoms, and 1 found it made a major difference. And interestingly for them, tremor was stopping them sleeping, and it actually helped with that as well. The drawback with it is it costs £250, £300. It's quite expensive, but they do offer a full refund for 30 days if you send it back to them. It doesn't work for everyone. As Will was alluding to earlier, and as you said, Lee, Parkinson's is quite complicated, and there aren't many interventions like this that work for everyone. It does work for some people. The big downside with it was that you hold it in one hand for 10 minutes, in the other hand for 10 minutes, which sounds dead easy. But you have to do that 3 or 4 times a day. And if you add those minutes up, that's an hour out of your day sat holding a little vibrating ball. And the bottom line from all of our reviewers, even the one who found it made a big difference to them, is it was too much money and too much faff for the results they saw from it, which was a bit disappointing. But this is the real world, as Will said, we're doing there's a lot of research happening into all these things. We're learning so much about how these different things work, and some of them kind of work, or some of them work for some people. And the villain ball seems to be one of those ones that works for some people. So yeah, hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, no, that is. Thank you.
If you want the detail, go to the tech guide, check out the review.
Indeed, yes. Great plug for our tech guide there. Yeah, so Will, can you tell us a little bit about, so let's say we have these sort of devices and tech and things like that, but how many stages would it go through before you would be prepared to say, yes, okay, this looks like a really good product that we can advise people to use, kind of thing?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, isn't it? Kind of what gauntlet does it have to go through before it gets the stamp of approval? And I suppose the answer to that is there would be different stamps, different levels of stamp of approval. I mean, there's a lot of these technologies may have been developed because of an observation of something that's seen in the scientific literature. So maybe there's a study where scientists have developed a vibrating device, even though it's not a commercially available product, and they've used that device and they've shown statistically, and I say that very purposefully, statistically meaningful or significant differences in whatever it is they're measuring, kind of walking behavior or something. And then someone has seen that science, and then they've developed a product off the back of it, and they might be able to point to that science to say, there's a good basis to expect that this device might work. And I think that's the case to some extent for thinking about the villain ball. There, it's conceivable, or there are certain mechanisms that we could point to say, well, actually, that this mechanism might be responsible for any effects that people do experience. So, in that sense, these technologies might be built from the ground up, if you like. But it's important to note that there might be a little bit of sort of Chinese whispers, if you like, along the way of people citing science and then using their product that's used in a slightly different way, and citing science that's not directly relevant to the product that's being used. And then the other way this system might work is if someone develops a product maybe without that supporting evidence, but it seems to result in anecdotal reports with people saying, oh, that seems to work really well for me. And then the role of science is to kind of retrofit that and go, okay, well, is this a placebo effect, or what could possibly be responsible in terms of these underlying mechanisms for driving this effect? And we try and kind of figure out why that might be the case. But in terms of how far a given product or technology has to be validated and evaluated in science before it's given a stamp of approval, the most common example of studies would be in a laboratory-based test, so not in the real world, in inverted commas. People might show that the product produces maybe immediate effects that they can point to and measure objectively and say, kind of this showed an effect. And for any credible scientist, that wouldn't be enough to say, oh, okay, therefore it should be recommended. To get to that point, it would need to be part of a trial where there is a control group, randomized groups where it's compared against maybe a placebo, and there to be a substantial, and we might say a clinically meaningful, but whatever, something that's a meaningful change, or something that's meaningful to that user. It's at that point if it's part of a randomized trial, that we might start to lift our eyebrows and go, oh, okay, that might have some real effects. So the bar is quite high.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I just think helpful for people to to know that, and this is why when we talk about our tech guide, this is stuff that people have tested, but it's not things that have been through scientific trials like that. Sandra, can I come back to you just to ask you about other sorts of tips or hints or ways that you manage, or you find that little devices or tech helps you to manage?
I'll jump in with a very low tech solution which I have. This is what I would call an alternative to the Villain ball. So it's all 500-gram weighted bands. This is one that you can have for your ankle. You can get gloves as well. And like if I was snowboarding or something, I put it on my wrist and it just stops the tremor. And it's like 10 quid, I think. So that's a complete winner. There's various apps which I tried out. I mean, when I was first diagnosed a couple of years ago, because I come from a tech background anyway, I was like right into the let me find out everything. There's lots of tracking apps. I personally found, having tried various of them, that I just didn't want to think about Parkinson's all the time. I think it made me feel like I was starting to be defined by the disease. So I've actually pulled right back, but there's three that I looked at which are of interest. So the Parkinson's On one is one of the ones that's covered in the tech guide, which has been designed by Kuhan, who's taken a lot of trouble to make it really easy to use with really big buttons on the screen. So that's worth a look at. There's another one called My Moves Matter, which is of particular interest to young onset women, because it's the only place where you can track your menstrual cycle against your Parkinson's symptoms. And anecdotally, there's nowhere near enough research in this area, but anecdotally, there's a really significant worsening of Parkinson's symptoms in relationship to the menstrual cycle. So the My Moves Matter app is a way of tracking both things simultaneously and then helping you to kind of understand the linkages. The other one I thought was really interesting, there's one called ProPD, which Laurie Mishley, I think is her name, made, and she's a researcher in Parkinson's in Canada, I think, and she's got a huge data set, and basically you can answer a questionnaire. I think you're supposed to every 6 months. It's quite a long detailed one, takes maybe 30 minutes, and you can effectively track your progression against a massive data set of other people's progression. So it's quite, if you're kind of a data person, it's a good way of comparing you against other things, and I guess looking at things in your lifestyle, like your exercise or your diet, so you can see what you can do. And then the final one, because being an ex-teacher, I have exhibits, got the beach band, and you can see that. So I've got this one here with the green was one of the really early ones, and this one is the production model. So I've tried this. For me, it didn't make a huge amount of difference. It didn't stop the tremor. I have various heart things going on, and bizarrely that does seem to have improved. I mean, I don't know if it's related or not, but it was weird before and it hasn't been weird since. There's a couple of things that are kind of worth noting about it. So one is it comes with a really fiddly band if you've got a tremor. Well, you can see my tremor now, so that's really difficult. But again, for like £5 off Amazon, you can get a stretchy band. So I've got a stretchy band on this one. Trying to think if there's anything else about that. I think that's about it, really.
Yeah,
but,
that's
yeah,
pretty good. I mean, it's really interesting. Yeah, no, it's interesting to hear you talk about that, because I was thinking about, tech is not a sort of a conclusion in and of itself, that we want it to have purpose and we want it to help us with stuff. So like, for example, if you are monitoring your symptoms around your menstrual cycle, that's something you can go to your Parkinson's nurse and say, okay, this is what I've noticed, and you've got the data in front of you, and it's enabling you to have those conversations and talk about perhaps if you're taking medication, or maybe you might need to tweak it, or those sorts of things. So that's a really good example, I think, of an app that's helping you to do something else and helping you perhaps stay a little bit more in control with your Parkinson's.
And I think that's the thing, because then it's effectively enhancing your life rather than taking over your life. And I think that's the difference.
Yeah, and I could see you nodding, Paul, when Sandra was talking about the whole monitoring thing and it just feeling overwhelming. Is that something that you identified with as well?
Yeah, I found the same thing. I didn't want to be thinking about my symptoms all the time and reflecting on them, because I think that doesn't help you sometimes. But what can be helpful is using that sort of app for a few weeks before you see your neurologist, just to help you think about what you might want to talk to them about, rather than trying to do it all the time. That can help.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So in the run up to having an appointment, kind of a way of making the most of that appointment.
Yeah, exactly, because they're always short and you always need to prioritize what you talk about. So having something that helps you think about what to prioritize can be really helpful.
That's a really, really good tip. I really like that. So yeah, so when you're approaching the appointment, do you usually have sort of 2 or 3 top things? These are the things that are important to me at this moment.
Yeah, I always try to go with a list of 2 or 3 things to talk about, because if you try to talk about too many things, you just won't get through it and it'll be frustrating and you'll be rushed.
Can I just jump in on that? I can't
Yeah,
remember the
do.
name of the app. I tried to convince my consultant to do this, but I didn't really get very far with it. But it's quite an interesting future development. So it was there's a company, maybe it's called Neuro something, I can't remember. But the idea was basically you use the wearable technology you might have in an Apple Watch or something, and it links back to a data dashboard. So then your neurologist has got the data from the last 6, 8, 12, however long it's been, many months since you last saw them. So rather than you just going along to your appointment and the things that have been bugging you for the last week being the things you talk about, it's an actually data-driven approach where you can actually talk about the things that have been affecting you over a longer period. But I know it's one of those things where the company's trying to get it in the NHS, and obviously the NHS is quite a tricky market to get into. So, but I think probably that's something that will come in time that's definitely helpful.
Maybe something for the future. Is that something that's on your radar, Will?
Yeah, absolutely. It's on a lot of researchers' radars. There's a lot of governance issues and things to do with data security and how that data gets shared. There are also issues to do with the potential kind of limitations on the things that device will measure and report, therefore narrowing the range of options for things that might end up being talked about. So if that device misses something that might be very important, it might be that it's the thing that it does measure that you end up talking about. But the potential for using these lower cost devices to track things over time in a way that's doesn't give too much of a burden to the user. It seems as though it's something that's a lot of people are trying to use to great effect, and I can imagine things will change quite rapidly in the next few years for the positive in that way.
Yeah, so again, it's really interesting, isn't it? So you're getting out what you put in, I suppose. So you're trying to, when people are designing apps and stuff like that, they've got to be thinking about, okay, what range of symptoms can we talk about? How much flexibility can we have within that to really make it useful?
Yeah.
I was also thinking about sort of mental well-being as well, so kind of spiritual, mental, wellness, as well as the sort of physical stuff. I don't know if either Paul or Sandra have ever used any apps or tested anything around mental health. If not, John, yes, go on, John. Sorry, I realised you got your hand up. I'm sorry about that. Come in.
Yeah, no, there are a small number of mental health apps specifically for Parkinson's. One of them is a great example of the value of research. So it's called PACT, which stands for Parkinson's something. Brain has gone completely blank. Anyway, it was produced by a consortium of universities. It was a research project that Parkinson's UK funded. At the end of the project, they had produced this app with a load of content, videos and exercises and stuff for people with Parkinson's to support their mental health on a day-to-day basis. And then they could then make that available for free. And so you can go to the app stores on your phone and download it and use it. And that's been great. We're also, we published a review of it on the Tech Guide earlier this year. There isn't, it has to be said, a huge number of these. I think one thing to be careful of is that a lot of self-help mental health apps assume that being sad is a bad thing that will pass. Whereas if you have a condition like Parkinson's, there we go, sorry, thanks, Will, Parkinson's acceptance and commitment therapy. It's a standardized approach customized for Parkinson's. Whereas if you've got a condition like Parkinson's, you know it's not going to get better. It's about learning to manage your life and to adopt the techniques and things that are going to help you sort of live well for as long as you can. And so some of these things can be a bit difficult and counterproductive because they tell you that get over it, you'll get back to normal and stuff like this, which is not necessarily the right way to approach it. I was going to just mention one other thing, that building on something Will was saying earlier about research and stuff. A couple of things to look out for if you're looking at devices and apps is for things that are registered medical devices, particularly something that claims to help, to make a difference to your health. Legally has to be a registered medical device, and it can be a class 1 or a class 2 and so forth. The higher the number, the more stringent the requirements it's had to meet are. And so if you're looking at something that's going to make to deal with symptoms, to make a difference in your life, then registered medical devices are good things to look for. And if you see something that claims to do things and is not a registered medical device, that should raise a bit of a red flag to you as something's not quite right there. Yeah, so just in terms of what you could look for in terms of evidence for a product, that's maybe something you can look for. They should always say whether they are or are not a medical device.
Yeah, that's great. That's a top tip. Will, and then Sandra.
Sorry about that, wrestling with my mute button. Yeah, thank you. It was just a quick note about the taking PACT as an example of one of these mental health apps. We talked earlier on, I think, Paul, you were mentioning about patient public involvement, and I had the pleasure of meeting the researchers who were developing, and they were presenting PACT at a meeting organised by Parkinson's UK, where people who hold current grants, research projects with Parkinson's UK, we all get together. And the researchers who developed that, they gave this talk, and the thing that really struck me about that was how much they had gone to lengths to involve people with a diagnosis of Parkinson's, their family, and really talk to people about what is meaningful to them. And it just struck me as a point where it seems to be something that's definitely emerging and prioritized by Parkinson's UK, and researchers are starting to really take this on board about how they can do that well. So coming back to the ideas about engagement in research, actually engagement in being part of group meetings with researchers, being part of PPI groups, actually it can be such a massive help to researchers, especially when they're developing these types of apps and things, because researchers are very good at sticking to their silo and trying to do a good job of the things they know, but there's plenty of things they don't. So having those that input is really critical, and it's something that is PACT is a very good example of that.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Sandra.
I was just going to come in on the medical device issue, just because I happen to have, because I've got my new Beats band with me, I've actually got the instructions here, but it's quite interesting to know it's in bold. The Beats band is a wellness device, not a medical device, is what it says on the instructions currently.
Yeah, so that's good to know. And we're not saying you can't try these devices or you shouldn't try devices or anything like that. And Sandra is using the device. But as John has said, something to look out for if you're shopping around and you want to know, okay, is this actually a device, or is it, what did you call it, a wellness?
Yeah, they say it's a wellness device. Yeah,
a wellness device. It says
as
wellness device,
to
not a medical device.
Not a medical device. Yeah. So an important distinction there. Yeah. Okay. Brill. So another question that got sent in was about phones and using phones and tablets and things like that. If you have got perhaps a little bit of challenge with the manual dexterity or anything like that, have we got some sort of tips around that? I think, John, you had mentioned ability net, but Sandra, did you want to come in first?
I was actually going to say the most important thing with me for my phone is an absolutely bomb-proof case, and this is my second bomb-proof case because the first one got destroyed, it got dropped so many times, but I drop my phone constantly, so it's actually really, I mean, we all need phones, you know, we can't live without them. there are many things I find with the tremor that make it really difficult to operate the phone. The buttons are very small and things like that. I think I mentioned before, the speech to text doesn't always work that well, but the thing that makes the biggest difference is a bomb-proof case.
Yeah, top tip. Several inches thick. John, can I come to you?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of these things that's very individual, and part of it you can't get round because, as Sandra said, some of them are just badly designed and have tiny, tiny buttons that are bad enough if you don't have a tremor. So, I mean, the only thing you can do to get around that is to buy a giant phone. You know, you can get these comedy phones, but they can be great for that. They just physically make things bigger. One thing you can do on many phones, but not all, is fiddle with touch sensitivity settings. So sometimes the issue is, you know, you're touching it more lightly than you meant to, or more heavily than you meant to, because of an accuracy issue. And you, on many phones, you can turn the sensitivity up and down. It's my phone doesn't have this setting. It's an standard Android phone, no touch sensitivity setting. The internet says that you should be, including AbilityNet, say you should be able to find that setting on your phone. iPhones should be more consistent than Android. One thing you can do as a quick hack, similar to Sandra's case thing, if you find that the screen is too sensitive and keeps going off when you don't mean it to, put a screen protector on it, because that makes the screen a bit thicker and makes it less sensitive, which it's often one of the downsides of screen protectors that make the screen less sensitive. It could be a useful addition to your big case, big screen protector.
Yeah, perfect. And anything from you on that, Paul? Any tips for using stuff like that, everyday stuff?
Not really on the phone, but I found that a voice assistant can be really helpful when you're off and your hands aren't working very well. I don't have a tremor, but I get quite rigid sometimes. I don't have the dexterity to use my hands very well. So I've used Alexa or whatever just to ask it to do things so it takes away that frustration.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So small, kind of smallish things, but can make a big difference. Yeah, okie dokie, that's great. And anything else on that for anyone? Otherwise, I shall look for.
I was just
Yeah,
going to follow up briefly on John's point about the accessibility settings. So I use Apple devices, so I only know about those. But something I've made a point of doing with my Mac and with my iPhone is just sitting there and just going through every single accessibility setting and trying everything there is on with the Apple devices in particular. There are a lot of things you can fiddle with. And, you know, the thing with Parkinson's, there's 40 different symptoms. We all have different combinations of symptoms. So I'd really recommend just sitting down and having the confidence to just pick your way through and try stuff, because there's going to be something in there that's going to help.
Yeah, good shout.
One I use, an accessibility setting. Have you ever lost the mouse, the pointer on the screen, because it's just gone, so you don't know where it is, and you think, where is it? There's usually one that will, if you shake the mouse or something, it will just make it much bigger, or it'll put an attention. That's useful. I find that a great setting. But yeah, there's always lots of different stuff, and it changes all the time, so you do have to go back and redo it every year or so.
Yes, and I suppose that's something that we'll be focusing on in the tech guide as well. John, does it get reviewed regularly?
So the tech guide focuses on technology specifically for Parkinson's. So we don't cover things like how to use a phone, how to use your desktop, this kind of your laptop kind of stuff. There is content on the Parkinson's UK website about this, and as I say, we would definitely defer to AbilityNet, who this is their area. It's something we're looking at with the tech guide through next year as something, because we want to help people do the most we can, but you know we can't do everything, but it's an extra for us, I'm afraid, at the moment.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's good to know. And just actually before I come through 24, I was going to ask you, Will, are you working on anything at the moment that you have got up on the hub, or that you're looking for people to take part in?
Thank you for asking. Yeah, so we don't have anything up on the hub at the moment, but there are about to be a few studies that get advertised. These range from online questionnaires that ask questions about the experience of certain symptoms, and what we're looking to do is well, we've developed a new questionnaire, and we're looking to validate that. And what that broadly means is that we're looking to see if the questions that we've come up with our PPI group, if they really get at the thing that we've been trying to design the questionnaire for. So that relates to the experience of a variety of different symptoms. And once we've validated that, the idea of it is to look to see how well that might help to predict individuals who might benefit most from certain technologies. So if people experience changes in the way that they, with their walking, for example, based on the responses to these different questionnaire items, it might be possible to recommend, okay, maybe using different sounds or like marching beats or vibrations or something might potentially have a greater chance of being effective. So that's something that's coming up. We're very pleased with the name of the questionnaire. Unfortunately, I didn't come up with it. It's going to be called the Low Control of Motion questionnaire, or the locomotion. It asks questions about the sense of control people have about their movements. So it's one of those ones I wish I'd come up with the name. I was talking to a fellow researcher saying, we've got this questionnaire about low control of motion. I'm trying to come up with a snappy name for the title. And he said, well, it's right in front of you. So that's one. And then we also have another study that'll be advertised in the next month or two. And we're really excited about that. It's been a long time coming in development, and that's looking at potential changes in balance control, where we look at the inner ear system, the vestibular system, and how that's the extent to which that's used, and potential changes in how that's used in people who experience certain symptoms. So that would involve a visit to Exeter, but we're hoping that might again help to identify potential targets for using technologies that might be helpful. I say might, we're hoping.
Yeah, no, that's good. An interesting little slice of a researcher's life as well. Thanks, Will. Sandra, did you want to come in?
Yeah, just one final thing. We were talking earlier about kind of cheap technology hacks. Something I use every day, and because I use it all the time, I don't even really think about it as a thing, is I have hooked around the ear headphones that I use when I'm exercising, because I guess it's something to do with this regular beat. So when I exercise, it's essential for me to have a really, really consistent beat. So I basically go on Spotify and I look for playlists that say 180 beats per minute, kind of rock things with like really, really pacey beat that's really consistent. And I find when I exercise with it, that I just keep going and all is good. And if I forget or I exercise, I just get slower and slower and slower, and the exercise is really ineffective. So just having some fairly cheap headphones and a Spotify account is probably the most important thing that I do. And in the grand scheme of things, it's very cheap.
Interesting. Yeah, really interesting. I do remember reading something from Michael J. Fox's autobiography, and he said that he struggled with mobility, but when he put ice skates on and skated around a rink, it was as if he didn't have Parkinson's at all. And it's it's really interesting how things work. And I did want to dig a little bit deeper about the Parkinson's On app that you mentioned, Sandra. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
I can't tell you a huge amount because I haven't used it for a while, but it was developed by Kuhan, who's had some funding from Parkinson's UK. It's a symptom tracker, but one of the things he's tried really hard on is the onboarding process when you get yourself set up on the app. And he's tried really, really hard to make everything really big and clear and actually physically easy to use with the tremor. And I certainly remember when I set it out that it definitely delivered on that. But John probably has more to say about that, because I know that there's been a proper review done on that on the tech guide. So I'll pass over to him.
Yeah, we've reviewed both Parkinson's On and My Moves Matter. Both have pros and cons. Both of them, as well as doing symptom tracking, they also do medication reminders. Those people who are starting on Parkinson's meds will be learning how important the exact timing is of those meds. One thing Parkinson's On does very neatly is, what matters with Parkinson's meds is you have to take them on time. What that means is the gap between your doses has to be precise. And if you wake up an hour earlier and take your first dose an hour earlier, then all your other do's to today have to be adjusted as well. Parkinson will do that for you automatically, whereas most of them will just give you the alarm at the same time as normal. So that's one thing to watch for. Conversely, my moves matter, as well as what Sandra was mentioning with the being able to track your menstrual cycle with symptoms and with medication, which is really important and very becoming, as she said, very informative. Doctors, women are people too, who knew? But it also has a really nice journaling feature. So as well as being able to just go tick, yes, I did my exercise and this kind of stuff, you can take notes about how you felt and what you did during the day and how active you were in general. And you can do that by writing, or you can leave a voice note, or you can record a video. It's very flexible, and our reviewers really like that about it, that they can just flip and adopt whichever they liked. So yeah, basically, if you're interested in taking your pills or in tracking your exercise or tracking your symptoms or any of those things, go and have a look, because there are quite a few apps created by people with Parkinson's for people with Parkinson's, and they tend to be more on target than the ones that are produced by companies for people with Parkinson's. The other one I would mention came out of a group in Oxford. It's called PD Buddy. So Parkinson's On is focused on medication and symptoms and information about Parkinson's. My Moves Matter is focused on anyone can use it and get a lot out of it, but it's focused on women's health. That's the big thing. And PD Buddy is focused on activity and exercise. They have a very particular view of staying active and how you should do that and keep track of it, as well as medications and symptoms. So that there's a whole load of really good, and they're all those three are completely free, as long as you have a phone.
I was just going to ask about that. Paul, do you have any experience? How do you remember to take your meds on time every time? Do you use any of those apps?
No, I probably should, but I don't. I think I've just sort of used it over the years. I don't have a problem remembering to take them, so I don't use an app. I don't think I like the idea of something prompting me every few hours to take medication. But yeah, one thing I would add about Parkinson, it does have some extra content like yoga meditations and stuff, which is quite good. I think they're quite soothing, and they can help when you have trouble sleeping and things. They can help relax you.
Yeah, I think I like that about technology, that you can use it by yourself. You can be with a group, but if you're on your own and it's something that you can perhaps take your mind off things a little bit. You've got something with you maybe that's support. So I can definitely see how that would benefit. And I know there are some NHS apps and things kind of emerging around. I don't know much about them around mental health, but I mean, would you hope to see those a bit more integrated one day?
Yeah, absolutely. It seems like a lot of progress has been made to generate content that people find meaningful and useful. But I think one thing that has come from the conversation over the last 5 minutes or so, the more widespread kind of general commercially available apps, or a lot of them are free, because they are so much more streamlined. They're a lot more user friendly than some of the Parkinson specific apps. The usability might be lacking slightly, even though the content might be very useful. So hopefully those things will start to be more integrated. But I'm beginning to feel a little bit out of my depth with that answer, because I don't know, say anywhere near as much as John about the different offerings there. It's just the sense that I got from talking to the people and having conversations like this today.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things I think we always say on the guide is about whether stuff is free or whether you've got to pay for it. John, do you want to come back?
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's. I mean that costing. Yeah, we talk about how expensive things are and all that kind of stuff. The one thing we tend to find, Sandra mentioned this earlier, is that the device, that the apps that have been created by people with Parkinson's tend to be more considerate of the issues you face. Parkinson is great, but it's very big buttons. My Moves Matter is similar. It's got a considered interface, but they have less resources behind them generally than some of the bigger ones. So we hope to see things continue to improve. The other thing I was going to mention, you mentioned the NHS. It's something that's worth mentioning is that there are devices and apps you can get on the NHS. Whether you get them or not, though, is then going to be dependent on getting prescribed them or given them by your particular doctor. which will depend on which area of the country you're in as to whether your NHS trust has adopted these things. But there are, and again, there's the distinction between the devices and apps you can get as a person and the devices and apps on the NHS. So there are 5 devices currently that were approved a couple of years ago by NICE for assessment for adoption by the NHS. These are things like wearable smartwatches that aim to do, as Will was saying, tracking particular symptoms, giving the consultant a dashboard of data about the patient over the space of a week or a couple of weeks before they go and see them, which it could be great. The flip side of that is what Sandra was saying earlier, that you can get one of those, a commodity watch and an app that will, a cheap, knockoff Android smartwatch from Amazon for 15 quid that will give some basic information, and you can get apps that will track that. It can track shake, it can track pulse, it can track, sleep habits. And just having that data, you can do that yourself. And there's a spectrum emerging between the stuff that only doctors can do versus the stuff you can do for yourself. And again, as both Paul and Sandra said, whether you choose to go down the road of measuring your life is a personal issue that you may choose to do or not.
Yeah, absolutely. Sandra, did you want to come in?
Yeah, just one other thing that just struck me with the mention of voice notes earlier is I think there's something around the thing about thinking about different ways to do the same thing. So I've spoken earlier about my difficulties using voice input to write texts, but I've started quite recently just sending voice notes. Obviously, it kind of turns me into a teenager, but it's actually solving the same problem in a different way. And I think there's probably something around thinking just a little bit more broadly about issues you're having, and it's actually, can I solve it in a different way rather than always just trying to replicate what I did before.
Yeah, definitely. What's not to love about being a teenager again? I tremble at the thought. Okay, well, we're coming to the end of our hour now, so I am going to say a huge thank you to all of our guests tonight for sharing your thoughts with us and giving us all those updates. I hope everyone has found that really useful. There's a couple of things I want to mention just before we wrap up. So Kuhan, we mentioned, who's behind the Parkinson's On device, is part of does a series of podcasts. So if you're interested in listening to podcasts, they're really very entertaining. Just completely the
2 Parkies in a pod.
Thank you. 2 Parkies in a pod. Yeah. And they cover loads of interesting topics and in a very engaging way. Also, the movers and shakers, I think, have covered quite a few different topics. I know Will has had the pleasure of meeting some of the movers and shakers in the past before. I wanted to say that I mentioned ParkOn at the beginning, and that's our conference. You can still sign up for that conference. There are online spaces still available. We can find out more about that on our website if you wish to. Our helpline is there to support with all things Parkinson's, listening ear to signposting you to local support and help. And our tech guide is available on our website, which we've been talking a lot about this evening. So please do dig into that too. This recording will become available as soon as it is. We'll send it out to everybody who signed up, and it will also be available on our YouTube channel afterwards as well. So thank you, everyone. And Brooke, if you can end the call for us.